For me, one of the things I suppose I still want to attest to and advocate for as someone that's sympathetic to liberal arguments and arguments that once for a moment seemed like they were arguments of the left, I don't know what to do with these taxonomies anymore, is to point out that part of the problem of imperialism and colonialism is the displacement of people, the disruption of lands. And any true America First movement or United Kingdom First or France First movement, I believe, and this is what I'd love your view on, or incorporate less meddlesome interventionism in these nations because of the destabilization that it causes. You know, there's a reason that people are coming from Venezuela. There's a reason that people are coming from the various countries that European misadventure has impacted. Take Haiti and its recent position in the news cycle. This is a country that's been exploited by the United States of America to a ridiculous degree, and not, I would add, by the kind of patriotic sort of forces that I would have characterized it as. But it's like, you know, George Soros is over there with the Clintons saying, you know, we're going to help you in this way and that, and apparently participating in the election of their government. So I wonder how you see not only the sort of potential risks of American advocacy and support in nations, because, you know, depending on the volatility of that nation and its regional disputes, it could lead to conflagration, and also the fact that this other issue that's affecting American patriots and American identity is the oft-cited crisis at the border, and how these things co-mingle.
Well, first of all, keep in mind that until quite recently, people viewed war in the United States as something that happens on someone else's territory. That's very important to understand. In other words, whatever happens, it doesn't happen at home in the United States. That's changing. It's changing for the reasons that you're outlining. We know that 1 million people right now are leaving Lebanon. 1 million people. Most of them will go north into Turkey and then try to move from Turkey to Europe. Some will try to go further afield if they can do it. The Turks aren't very happy. They've already got 3 or 4 million refugees living on their territory right now, largely because of us. We were trying to remove Assad from power in Damascus. And of course, the Iraq war didn't help matters because we displaced large numbers of people from Iraq. So you're on to something that's very important. What we're finding right now is, sure, if you open your borders, anybody who can will come because they look at the United States as an opportunity for income, better life, better standard of living, especially when you promise them at the same time free medical care and free cash and all sorts of other things. Now, this isn't going to work because the American people are really feeling the pain. And just as people in Great Britain are feeling the pain from the mass migration into Great Britain over many years, for a long time, people complained about it. I remember watching a BBC television documentary, this is 20 plus years ago. It was called Bloody Foreigners. And it was all about how much everybody was upset over the massive numbers of foreigners pouring into Great Britain. Well, that was over 20 years ago. So I can imagine it's much worse now. We're almost in the Western world, in the United States, in Great Britain, in the West. We are like a giant rowboat. And the rowboat has people on the oars, and it's got people steering. And we've taken aboard several people that we didn't want to drown. We brought them in. But the problem is the boat is now overloaded, and it looks as though the boat could sink with all of us in it because we simply can't afford it. We can't cope with it. We can't survive it. Because when the people come into the country, they do what you would expect them to do. They set up a version of their country on your soil. And then they expect you to respect them and do as they wish without regard to what it is that you may have or may not have in your country. All of these things, you talked about a juncture, we sometimes call it a strategic inflection point. All of this is in fact coming together, and there's one other factor that we haven't considered. That's the fragility of the financial system and the economy. And what you get through the mainstream or from the Bank of England or from the Fed or whatever it is, or the ECU, what do you get? You get, print more money. This isn't a problem. We can master this. We can cope with this. Well, the truth is we're reaching the end point where we just cannot print more money. We can't afford to inflate ourselves. The bottom line is, I don't know what's going to happen, but if you look at the potential in the Middle East for a war that will spread rapidly beyond Iran, because if Iran is attacked by us, the Russians and the Chinese will not allow Iran to be pulverized into submission. That will not happen.
Why?
because they do business with Iran, and they see Iran as inextricably intertwined with them. They depend, and China depends very heavily on all the oil and natural gas that come out of the Persian Gulf. And a war with Iran would inevitably result in the destruction of the oil facilities and the refineries in Iran, and probably close down the Straits of Hormuz. The Chinese don't want that, by the way. Neither do the Japanese nor the Koreans. And if you go to Russia, what?
For the same reason.
Yeah, they're all very dependent on
and the same relationships.
Absolutely. You have people right now trying to build an alternative passage through the Suez Canal. They're trying to build rail lines and road lines that run from the Indian Ocean at the bottom of the Iranian state border on the Indian Ocean, all the way up through the Caucasus Mountains into Russia, and from there into Europe, because they don't want to have to deal with the problems that exist in the Red Sea and the Suez Canal right now. And that route, if they build it as they plan to, is a lot faster than moving by ship up through the Red Sea, through the Suez, into the Mediterranean, and then up to the North Sea. So everyone is already tired of dealing with us and our meddling, which is causing everyone to be miserable. So, that's clear. That's unambiguous. The BRICS, the whole BRICS movement.
Explain that BRICS movement.
I knew that was coming.
I know sort of a bit what it is, but
this started with Brazil, Russia, India, China. Now it includes Saudi Arabia. The Turks want to join it. It looks like there are another 84 states on the planet want to join it. It promises to be an open free market system where everything is gold-backed. In other words, the currency is based on existing gold holdings.
Like this country used to be.
Exactly. And that gets them out from under us, because our financial system, surprise, surprise, in the 50 years after World War II was structured to do what? Make us wealthy, give us a high standard of living at the expense of everybody we do business with. So when you do business in dollars right now, we're literally passing our high debt on to everyone else, because we have no brakes. There's no one breaking the movement to what I would call financial Armageddon. Nobody wants to go down with us. So they're building an alternative structure. We see this as a threat. Well, it may be, but we created it. In other words, just as we created the war in Ukraine by trying to push this NATO issue, build up an enemy force inside Ukraine designed to attack Russia, designed to harm Russia. And you've listened to the comments. Our goal is to harm Russia and drive them back into the Stone Age, to divide the place and all this kind of nonsense. We are doing those kinds of things everywhere. And right now, our unconditional support for Mr. Netanyahu makes it abundantly clear to everybody in the region that we are backing them not just for defense of Israel, but for Israeli supremacy in the region. And the majority of people who live in the region aren't interested in living in an environment of Israeli military and political hegemony backed by the United States.
The war against free speech is in full swing. We are the vanguard, bravely fighting back. Rumble's the home of this channel, Stay Free, and a leader in defending the fundamental human right of free speech. They've joined X to sue a cartel of advertisers and ad agencies who conspire to block ad revenue from going to the platforms. Recently, they've launched Rumble Premium. This, I think, is going to be a game changer for all of us. It's an ad-free viewing experience with great perks for viewers and creators. Rumble Premium will give you the ability to dive into your favorite content on your mobile or desktop or smart TV and savor every uninterrupted second of my content. Why don't you upgrade to Rumble Premium today? Support my free speech and the free speech of other content creators on this platform. Please go to Rumble now, rumble.com/premium. And if you use the code BRAND, you'll save $10 and Rumble will be aware that our stream is creating great converts. So that's rumble.com/premium and do use the code BRAND to save $10. Anyway, there's a link there at the bottom of the screen now. We're posting it in the chat. Join up.
So you look at what's happened on the war front, which you've talked about. You look at the massive migrations that have come out of the Middle East and North Africa, largely as a consequence of our policies and the chaos and criminality we've created in many of these countries. Then you add to that the impact of the migration on our societies, which has been to weaken them, weaken our national sense of identity, weaken the coherence of our societies. We talk about social cohesion. Well, our social cohesion in this country is very low. That's the problem. In order for a large country like the United States to survive over time, it needs strong societal cohesion. Now, there are people in Washington that says, well, that's why these wars overseas can be good. They'll force cohesion on the nation. No, they won't. We were very reluctant to go to war both before World War I and World War II. The reason Eisenhower ended the war and pulled us largely out of Korea was because there was no support for the war in Korea. Vietnam hung on for years until people finally figured out we're not defeating communism, but we're killing 2 million people in Vietnam. And what good is this, and how do we benefit from it? And all we do is take losses and ruin the economy. I mean, we've been through all of these things. The American population is beginning to wake up. Not fast enough, in my judgment, but they're beginning to wake up. And that's why you and I and RFK Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard spoke yesterday and said we've got to end these overseas wars because we know what it means. The wars breed corruption. They breed spoliation. They breed division. In other words, they only enrich a small portion of the population. Remember, the 7 richest counties in the United States, surprise, surprise, are right where we are. They surround Washington, D.C. So where's the benefit to the larger population? There is no benefit. All you have to do is drive across the United States and see what life is like. This is not 1965. This is not 1995. Things are not good. Americans know that. They ask why. So we know that peace and prosperity ultimately go together. And that's what Eisenhower said. He said people need to know that, yes, we can secure our country, but we can also have prosperity. In other words, we keep defense expenditures and defense activities in check. There's a limit to how much we're going to invest in it. Today, we have $1 trillion defense budget. And what are we doing? We don't defend our borders. We don't defend our littoral waters. Everybody complains about the massive criminality. The police are not allowed to do their jobs in many cases, or if they do, they go to jail and they're afraid to act. And they'll tell you flat out that in many of our big cities, they're going to need military support to restore some measure of order. I remember in 2003, just before we went into Iraq, there was this lovely lady who lived in Washington, D.C. She was an Afro-American or black lady. She was about 65 or 70. She was interviewed on television. And the story was carried in the Washington Post. And they said, what do you think about the decision to intervene in Iraq? And she said, well, I wish they'd send the U.S. Army to my neighborhood and get rid of all the criminals and drug salesmen and everything else and bring some peace to my neighborhood. Well, she was right. And right now, we're sending 700 National Guardsmen from Tennessee over to the Middle East. Eastern Tennessee was virtually destroyed by this Hurricane Helene. Why are National Guardsmen in Tennessee going to the Middle East when they should be addressing the damage from the hurricane inside their own states? The same thing's happening in all the other states. What are we doing? This is where Donald Trump gets a lot of support because he says we can't live in a world that's America last.
Our new The Oracle series, our first ever group interviews designed to bring the greatest and most authoritative voices in particular subjects together for the very first time. Robert Malone, Dr. Pierre Corey, and Steve Kirsch.
What we've experienced is a globally deployed psychological bioterrorism playbook. It's well developed.
And then I started to see just global propaganda directed at essentially distorting, dismissing, and suppressing the evidence of efficacy. And I saw it as a crime.
And at that point, I knew that this was not just a coincidence. There were too many black swans over too short a period. I've never heard anything like this story in my life.
They seem to get the human psyche so well when it comes to brainwashing us and propagandizing us to the direction that they want us to go in, that you would think that they would know that pulling all of these various tactics would actually just push support towards Trump, not away from him.
Ryan Ruth, some of his posts even show that he appeared to have been working with, in his own words, the U.S. Embassy in Kiev. He's doing effectively military intelligence, human trafficking of terrorists.
It's in this context that I think Ruth was kind of radicalized. He decided that while he wanted to assassinate Putin, the easier thing would be to assassinate Donald Trump.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you want to see more uncensored content where free speech can flourish, join our live stream. Click the link right here to watch the next video if you want to, or become a member of a growing movement. Download the Rumble app and you'll be informed every time we make a new piece of content. Stay free.